At first glance, Clara Jameson didn't belong. The glassy-eyed laughter of the guests echoed through the grand hall as she moved from one guest to the next, carrying trays of expensive drinks, all while being invisible. She wasn't one of them. Not really. To the family, she was just the nanny, the hired help. She'd raised their children, cleaned their messes, and yet, to them, she was nothing more than an accessory in their perfect lives. Her clothes were mocked, her accent ridiculed, and her presence barely acknowledged, except when they needed someone to pour their champagne. But that night, as she walked among the people who had torn her down for years, she had no idea that everything was about to change. A crew of reporters arrived unexpectedly, and when they asked her, of all people, to give an interview, the spotlight finally turned. And in that moment, Clara realized she had more than just a voice. She had the power to make them listen. As the mic was handed to her, Clara took a deep breath. She wasn't the forgotten nanny anymore. Tonight, she would show them who she truly was. And when she spoke into the microphone, everything and everyone would change forever. At 29, Clara Mitchell didn't expect life to look like this. A single mother to a 5-year-old boy with a laugh like sunlight and eyes that mirrored hers, she had worked tirelessly to rebuild her life after her husband left without warning. With no child support, no steady income, and a mountain of bills, she accepted a live-in nanny job through a distant cousin's referral, one that would eventually lead her straight into a storm of humiliation and redemption. The Hawthorns were Clara's extended family, but only by blood. Her mother and their matriarch, Veronica Hawthorne, were cousins who hadn't spoken since Clara was in diapers. So when Veronica offered Clara a job caring for her 2 grandkids and living in their massive Lakeview estate, it was less an act of compassion and more of a performance for social currency. To Veronica, having less fortunate family under her roof painted her as generous. Clara never asked for pity. She wanted dignity. But what she received was closer to servitude masked as employment. For 9 months, Clara cared for Veronica's grandchildren, prepping meals, managing tantrums, organizing school drop-offs. She was up before anyone else and asleep long after the house went quiet. Yet every family gathering, every dinner, and every photo-worthy moment, Clara was reminded she wasn't one of them. They never introduced her as family. She was always Clara, the nanny. And now, as she stood in the kitchen with a tray of chilled drinks balanced on her arm, dressed in a second-hand blouse that was a little too tight around the shoulders, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses floated in from the sun-drenched backyard where the annual Hawthorne Summer Bash was in full swing. Veronica had invited over 100 people, business associates, neighbors, distant relatives who barely remembered each other's names. Clara's son, Liam, was tucked away in her small upstairs room with a coloring book and a juice box because this isn't really a kid-friendly event. Clara exhaled and walked through the French doors onto the patio. The pool sparkled. Guests lounged under expensive umbrellas, and the Hawthorne family posed like royalty at the center of it all. As she made her way across the deck offering drinks, she caught whispers, mocking ones. "Did you see her blouse? Looks like something from a garage sale." "Who brings their kid to work? So unprofessional." "She's not really family, you know. Just some cousin's daughter who needed a job." Clara smiled politely and kept serving. Every tray passed like another slap to her pride, but she refused to cry. Not in front of them. She wasn't invisible, though she might as well have been. Even her own cousin, Vanessa, now a real estate mogul with a diamond ring big enough to reflect sunlight into people's eyes, didn't acknowledge her. Vanessa had once stayed at Clara's house for an entire summer when they were kids. They used to sneak snacks at midnight and build blanket forts. But today, Vanessa barely made eye contact. Then came the moment that Clara wouldn't forget for years. Veronica clinked her wine glass, standing beneath a rose arch with her perfectly coiffed hair and tailored white dress. "Let's raise a glass," she announced, "to family, to legacy, and to remembering who we are." Her gaze lingered on Clara with just enough venom to be noticed. "Some of us may be among us, but not of us." The laughter was loud, too loud. Clara felt heat rise to her face, but before she could turn to retreat, Vanessa's husband chuckled and added, "You mean the help?" Another wave of laughter. She nodded slightly, turned back to the kitchen, and almost tripped over the pain swelling in her chest. But that's when everything changed. As she reached the door, a black SUV pulled into the long driveway. A crew stepped out. 3 people, cameras in hand, wearing badges with the logo of the Global Women's Initiative. Clara paused. She recognized the name. Weeks ago, she'd been nominated for their Against All Odds award by the director of Liam's preschool, where Clara had volunteered despite her full-time job. She had written an essay about her experience as a single mother, about resilience, about motherhood without a manual, but she never expected anything to come of it. Now, the GWI team was here. At this house, at this party, a woman with auburn hair and a clipboard approached the group near the pool. "Excuse me," she said confidently. "We're looking for Clara Mitchell. She's our Global Resilience Award recipient and our feature for this month's Women of Strength broadcast. Is she here?" The silence was electric. Veronica's champagne flute froze mid-air. Vanessa's mouth parted slightly. The cousins exchanged stunned looks. Then slowly, so slowly, every guest turned toward the woman in the worn blouse, holding an empty drink tray. Clara didn't move. Not right away. Not until the woman spotted her and smiled. "There she is!" The reporter rushed over and gently touched Clara's arm. "You didn't reply to the email," she said softly. "We decided to surprise you. If you're comfortable, we'd love to film a short interview right here, with your family in the background. You're an inspiration." The pause that followed was thick with shock. Clara looked past the reporter, past the stunned party guests, past Veronica's frozen expression, and then, very slowly, nodded. She handed off the tray to a dumbfounded waiter, stepped forward, and followed the woman to the microphone they began setting up on the stone terrace. Clara stepped up to the microphone as if in a trance. The sun hit her hair just right, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like someone surviving in the shadows. She felt seen. Not as someone's nanny, not as the poor cousin, but as someone worthy of being listened to. She took a breath, the kind that carried the weight of years she had swallowed whole. "I never thought I'd be standing here," Clara began, her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "Especially not in front of a crowd that once pretended I wasn't here at all." Behind her, guests exchanged awkward glances. The cameras rolled, capturing every twitch of guilt and disbelief. "I'm a single mom. I came here because I needed help. And instead of finding a family, I became invisible. I raised your children, fed your babies, cleaned your messes, while you whispered behind my back and called me the help." She paused. "But I still showed up, every single day, because my son was watching." In the crowd, Veronica's face had gone rigid, but her eyes couldn't hide the storm brewing underneath. "Today," Clara continued, "I'm receiving this award for resilience. But I don't think it's mine alone. It belongs to every woman who's ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told she didn't belong." Applause rippled through the crowd, hesitant at first, then stronger. The news crew smiled, clearly impressed. And then, the next twist hit. So fast, so sharp, it left the crowd speechless. A small girl in a ruffled dress stepped forward from the back of the patio, clutching a handmade card. It was Veronica's 6-year-old granddaughter, the one Clara had been raising as if she were her own. She tugged at Clara's skirt and whispered, "Can I say something too?" Clara leaned down and gave her the mic without hesitation. "My nanny is my best friend," the girl said into the mic. "She teaches me to be kind, and she tells me I can be anything. She's more of a mommy than mommy is." The silence was deafening. Vanessa's expression cracked. Her husband turned to her slowly. Guests shifted uncomfortably. No one knew where to look. Clara gently took the mic back, her eyes glossy but unwavering. "Out of the mouths of babes," she said quietly. Veronica turned and began walking back towards the house. But she didn't get far. A tall man in a dark suit was standing just beyond the gates. His sharp cheekbones, stormy blue eyes, and familiar features made Clara's breath catch in her chest. It had been 6 years. 6 long, unforgiving years. It was Liam's father, Elliot Jameson, the man who had left her with nothing but a note and an empty bank account. And now he stood here, right at the edge of her reckoning. Clara's knees nearly buckled. He stepped forward, and the cameras followed, sensing another layer unraveling. "I wasn't invited," he said calmly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But I saw the announcement, and I had to come." Vanessa gasped. Veronica gripped the wine table like she might collapse. Because they all knew something Clara didn't. Elliot Jameson wasn't just her ex-husband. In the years since he vanished, he had become the silent investor behind Hawthorne Properties. Veronica had taken his money. Vanessa's real estate empire? Funded by him. He was the man they all answered to, but they never knew the woman he left behind was the same Clara they now mocked daily. "You fund this family?" Clara asked, stunned. Elliot nodded. "I did. I thought it was the only way I could stay connected to my son without causing more damage." The guests, once just casual observers, were now glued to the unfolding drama like it was a live soap opera. Elliot turned to the crowd and raised his voice. "None of you knew, did you? That the woman you treated like trash raised my child. That you let her serve drinks while she held this entire house together." Whispers grew louder. Phones were now filming. Vanessa stepped forward, her voice shaking. "You said you wanted discretion, that we shouldn't talk about your past. You never said—" "That's because I was ashamed," Elliot said. "But she's not someone to be hidden. She's the strongest person I've ever known." Clara didn't cry. Not now. Not when the power balance had finally shifted. Not when people who stepped on her were now staring up at her, silenced. She leaned back into the mic. "Looks like I wasn't the only one keeping secrets." Clara stepped back from the microphone, the applause still echoing faintly as whispers filled the space like smoke. Elliot's sudden appearance had turned everything upside down, but the shock hadn't settled yet. Not even for Clara. She hadn't seen him in years, hadn't even heard his voice since the day he walked out, leaving her with a newborn and an eviction notice. And now he was here, at her family's estate, standing under the string lights like a ghost from a life she tried to bury. Clara didn't move toward him. She couldn't. "I didn't come to reclaim anything," Elliot said, eyes locked on hers. "I came to apologize, and to meet my son." That single sentence cut through the crowd like a blade. Everyone turned to face the little boy at the edge of the lawn. Liam stood frozen, his small hand gripping the edge of the drink tray Clara had placed down earlier. He looked between his mother and the man he didn't recognize, the man who shared his eyes. Clara's instinct was to protect, to grab Liam and run. But before she could, Vanessa stepped forward. She looked shaken, and for once, not perfectly composed. "You can't just walk in here and pretend like this is some reunion," she snapped at Elliot. "You left her. You left all of us to deal with your mess." Clara turned her head sharply. "All of us?" she repeated. "You mean the people who used me like a maid and told me I didn't belong? Don't act like you carried me. You carried drinks on my back." Vanessa flushed, but before she could speak again, a woman's voice called out from the garden. "I have something to say." Everyone turned. It was Aunt June, the only one in the family who had ever shown Clara an ounce of warmth. But now she looked older, frailer. Still, her voice didn't waver. "I've been quiet long enough," June said, stepping slowly into the center of the crowd. "Clara came to this house when she was 18, broken from a heartbreak none of you even cared to ask about. She raised her child here while you let your kids throw tantrums and trash the place. And I warned you all. I said, one day Clara's going to rise and you'll all be left choking on your cruelty." Gasps followed. "You knew?" Veronica asked, her voice sharp. "I knew everything," June replied, "including who Liam's father was. But I also knew it wasn't my place to tell. That was Clara's pain to carry, and she did it with more grace than any of you have ever shown in your lives." Suddenly, the cameras panned to June. The moment was real, raw, electric, and just when Clara thought the tension couldn't rise any higher, it did. An assistant producer from the news crew approached her. "Sorry," she said, leaning in, "but there's one more surprise." Clara blinked. "What do you mean?" "We didn't just come here because of the award," the producer said quietly. "You've been nominated for the Global Guardian Prize. It's international, for women who raise children in hardship and change lives quietly. Your application was anonymous, until now." Clara's heart stopped. "I didn't apply." "We know. Someone else did." The producer stepped back, and Elliot raised a single hand. "I did," he said, voice low but carrying. 6 months ago, I hired a private investigator, followed your life from a distance, saw how you worked 3 jobs, how you never once asked for help. You deserved more than silence." Clara couldn't speak. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. And then came the final blow, a twist no one saw coming. The estate doors burst open. 2 officers walked in, suits crisp, badges gleaming. They approached Veronica. "Mrs. Veronica Hawthorne?" She stiffened. "Yes? You're under investigation for tax fraud, embezzlement, and the illegal use of charitable foundation funds for personal gain." The color drained from her face. "What? That's ridiculous!" she cried. "Who reported this?" The officer turned a page in his file. "It was an anonymous whistleblower, but the documents we received were traced back to someone in this household. A Clara Jameson." Clara stood still, barely able to believe what she was hearing. She hadn't sent anything. But June stepped forward again. "No, that wasn't Clara, that was me. I've watched her suffer long enough while Veronica funneled donations into private accounts. Clara didn't know, but I did, and I had copies." The silence was explosive. People didn't know where to look. Veronica stumbled back as the officers escorted her toward the gate. Guests whispered and recorded, eyes wide, drinks forgotten. And Clara stood there, not broken, not embarrassed, not even angry, just strong, unshaken, seen. The world had finally turned, and it wasn't done turning yet. As Veronica was led out in handcuffs, the air shifted. The weight of years, of silence, of buried resentment, of whispered judgments, seemed to dissolve with every step she took away from the estate. Guests murmured, some filming, others backing away from the scene as if guilt might rub off on them if they stayed too close. Clara didn't move. She couldn't. Her body buzzed with adrenaline and confusion. Just moments ago, she was invisible. Now, The spotlight burned like truth, exposing everything, even what she hadn't asked to be revealed. Liam clung to her hand. She knelt beside him, brushing his hair gently. "Mommy, is she going to jail?" he asked softly. Clara looked him in the eyes. "Maybe," she said gently. "But that's not our worry tonight." From behind them, Aunt June approached. Her voice was quiet, but firm. "You don't owe this house anything anymore, Clara." "I know," Clara replied, rising to her feet. "But there's still something I need to say." She walked slowly back to the mic. The cameraman adjusted his lens. Clara took a breath. "When I came to this house, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd be welcomed. I thought family meant something. But I learned the hard way that some people will only see you by the title they give you. Nanny. Housekeeper. Mistake." The crowd listened in stunned silence. "I raised your children while you went on vacations. I washed your sheets, listened to your secrets, and watched your kids cry while you laughed at cocktail parties. You called me family when it was convenient, but you never saw me, until now." The pause was heavy. "I didn't earn this moment to make anyone look bad. I earned it by surviving what you threw at me and staying kind. I didn't raise Liam in bitterness. I raised him with dignity. And I will never let this house, or your money, define us again." People applauded. Not just guests, but the crew. Even a few former family friends who'd once whispered behind her back. But the evening wasn't done. A tall, well-dressed woman pushed through the thinning crowd. She looked official. Press badge, clipboard, sharp red lipstick, and a sense of purpose. "Clara Jameson?" she asked. "Yes?" "I'm not with the local crew," the woman said. "I'm with the International Women's Legacy Foundation. You've been nominated for more than just a parenting award." Clara blinked. What?" "You're being offered a grant, full scholarship, for you and your son, living stipend, travel, and, if you accept, a spot on the Foundation's advisory panel to help shape childcare policy for underserved women." The estate went quiet again. Clara didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A lifetime of being ignored, and now she was being offered the power to help others like her. But not everyone was thrilled. From the back of the crowd, a cold, familiar voice called out. It was Victoria, her cousin, Veronica's daughter. She stepped forward, her heels sharp against the stone. "You think you're a hero now? You think anyone will actually take you seriously? You've got a kid out of wedlock, no college degree, and your dress came from a thrift store." Clara stared at her. The cruelty wasn't surprising, but the desperation was. Victoria wasn't mad because Clara succeeded. She was mad because Clara succeeded without asking permission. "I think people take me seriously," Clara said, her voice calm. "Because they know how hard I worked. Because they watched me get mocked and keep standing. And because I don't step on people to feel tall." Victoria opened her mouth again, but before she could speak, Elliot walked up beside Clara. "She doesn't need a man to validate her," he said. "But I'll say it anyway. She's the strongest person I've ever known. I left when I was weak. I see that now. And I'm not asking for forgiveness, just the chance to do right, starting with my son." Clara looked over at Liam. He was watching Elliot cautiously, and then something unexpected happened. Liam let go of her hand. He took a slow step forward and offered Elliot a juice box from the tray. No words, just a gesture. It broke something open in Clara's chest, but just as a tender silence fell, it shattered again. One of the house staff, Rosa, came running from the back entrance, breathless. "There's police at the back gate," she said. "More of them, and they're asking for Victoria." The crowd spun toward her. "What?" Victoria paled. "Why?" "They found your mother's secret ledgers," Rosa said, holding up her phone with a photo of handwritten pages. "Guess who signed off on them?" Everyone turned toward Victoria, who began backing away slowly, muttering, "This is a setup." But it wasn't. The moment was closing in fast, and the walls that once protected the cruel were crumbling. And Clara? She stood still, the mic in her hand, the future in her heart. The police escorted Victoria toward the gate as she protested loudly, her shrill voice echoing off the garden walls. Her perfectly curated appearance began to crack, mascara smudged, hair out of place, her expensive clutch hanging open with receipts fluttering out. The same guests who had once fawned over her were now watching with a mix of curiosity and relief, like they had always known something was off, but hadn't dared say it. Clara stood still, holding Liam's hand. The crowd had shifted. No longer a wall of judgmental eyes, now they looked to her as if she were the anchor in the chaos. Suddenly, an older woman pushed through the crowd. Her presence was almost ghostly. Thin, wrinkled hands, eyes that knew pain and power. It was Clara's grandmother, Edith Jameson, who hadn't been seen in public in nearly 5 years. The family matriarch. Everyone froze. She walked slowly, leaning on a silver cane, and stopped just a foot from Clara. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stared. Then she whispered, "I watched from the upstairs window, watched as they tore you down, and you never once fought dirty." That's rare. Even rarer in this family. Clara swallowed hard. "I was part of it too," Edith continued. "Not with words, but with silence. And silence can be worse than slander." Clara didn't know what to say. "You are more Jameson than any of them," Edith added quietly. "If you're willing, I'd like to put the house in your name. It's time someone with a soul ran this place." Gasps rippled through the guests. Clara shook her head, stunned. "I don't want this house," she said simply. "I don't need it." Edith looked startled. "I needed a home for years," Clara said, "but I built one without you, without this name. My home is where Liam sleeps safe and loved, not behind these walls." It wasn't defiance, it was clarity, and it stunned everyone more than if she'd accepted. As Edith slowly nodded and turned to leave, one of the younger cousins, a girl no older than 16, stepped forward from the crowd and said, "I want to be like you someday." Clara smiled gently. "Then start by treating people like they matter." There was a small pause, and then something no one expected. Elliot's father, Robert, stepped up. He was the coldest of them all, the man who had once told Clara she wasn't fit to serve food at their table. But his expression now was changed, torn between pride and regret. "I misjudged you," he said, terribly. "I always thought strength looked like control, like reputation. But I see now it looks like you." Clara didn't respond. She had nothing left to prove. And that was when her phone buzzed. She looked down. It was an email from the Women's Legacy Foundation. It wasn't just a grant. They wanted her to travel abroad to speak at a global summit on equity, motherhood, and resilience. Expenses paid, and Liam would be included. She could hardly breathe. But the night had one last surprise. A boy Clara had once cared for, now a grown man, stepped out from the shadows. He was one of the first children she'd nannied for when she was just 17. His name was Jake. He stood tall, now in a suit, camera crew behind him. "I work for a documentary project," he said. "I've been trying to find you for years. You changed my life. When my parents were divorcing, when I thought no one cared, you were there." He turned to the camera. "This is the woman who raised a generation that the Jamesons neglected. This is the legacy, not the house, her." Clara's hands trembled. For so long she had been buried in the background. Now her truth was being recorded, not just witnessed, for millions to see. That night the estate emptied quickly. No more music, no more cruelty dressed as tradition. Clara and Liam walked out hand in hand, past the gates, past the polished stone lions that once symbolized wealth and power. Behind them, the house stood still, like it was finally mourning what it had lost. Liam looked up at her as they reached the sidewalk. "Are we going to be famous now?" Clara laughed softly. "We're going to be free." And for the first time, she believed it. Because when the world finally saw her, not as a servant or a shadow or a mistake, but as a force, they didn't look away. They listened, they learned, and they followed her lead. And that's how Clara turned her life around, from being overlooked and underestimated to becoming a beacon of strength and success. It just goes to show, never let anyone define your worth. If you enjoyed Clara's incredible journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with anyone who needs a little inspiration.